Is here. Senator, what is happening in terms of oversight of this nearly unprecedented and historic use of a president over the wishes of a state governor, activating that state's National Guard and then immobilizing 700 active duty Marines?
Nicole, this is hugely problematic. I think it's illegal, unprecedented, and I think it is a very dangerous priority. And I expressed that position in an Armed Services Committee hearing yesterday. The National Guard, let's start there. This is a partnership that goes back centuries between the president and governors and guardsmen and women. And the Guard is a partnership between presidents and governors. It's not a battering ram to be used against states. The Guard gets deployed when a governor asks for it, or sometimes the president will ask a governor to loan troops to an endeavor. I did that when I was governor of Virginia. I lent Virginia Guard members to assist President George W. Bush on border operations. But it's a cooperative arrangement, a partnership, not a tool and not a bludgeon. The president's use of it is escalatory. It was not asked for, in fact, objected to by the governor of California and the mayor. My friends in Los Angeles that I've reached out to, I said, are these protests generally peaceful with a few bad apples, or are they too violent and out of control? And they all came back and said, generally peaceful, a few bad apples. That's what local law enforcement is for. And frankly, if the president thought that the federal agents needed some more assistance, he could have sent federal law enforcement, marshals, FBI, DEA. The choice did not do that, but instead flood the zone with Marines and National Guard is to intimidate protests that Donald Trump does not like. He's using this for political ends and to distract people's attention. We're writing the defense bill right now, and you can be sure that my colleagues and I will be offering proposals to dramatically limit the ability of a president to use the military like his own palace guard in the way that President Trump is doing now.
It strikes me that General John Kelly, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, took the extraordinary step for a general and the former chief of staff of going on the record in a recorded interview and warning the country of just this, of what Donald Trump might do to active duty military in terms of deployments on the streets of American cities. We are on the other side of that hinge point. That has already happened, but you represent a state that could very well have protests over the weekend. What have you learned from the last 48 hours in California that you can apply this weekend in Virginia?
Well, there will be peaceful protests in Virginia this weekend. There's sort of a No King's Day set of events all around the country on June 14, and there will be a number of Virginia cities where there will be peaceful protests. Look, the First Amendment to the Constitution, which a Virginian, James Madison, drafted, says that Americans are guaranteed the right to peacefully assemble and petition government for redress of grievances. That was put in the Constitution not just to protect individuals. It was put in there because there was a belief that candid and robust discussion of views, even dissenting views, would help American democracy function better. So the first thing I'm saying to all Virginians and all Americans is Donald Trump, through use of the military, may be trying to frighten you away from using your First Amendment rights. Don't let it work. We're coming up on the 250th anniversary of American democracy in 2026, and we need brave, patriotic Americans who will not just embrace but will act upon their constitutional rights. Peacefully assemble and petition government to fix what's going wrong. And under this administration, an awful lot is going wrong with the economy, with mistreatment of all kinds of people, and with using the military in this way. So I'm encouraging people to be active, be peaceful, but be active. We need brave patriots to be active right now.
Will you join the protests on Saturday?
I am likely to be at one of the many events in Virginia, but I have many to choose from, so I will not be able to be at all of them.
What are your private conversations with your fellow Democrats about how to make this a bipartisan group that is both concerned about and protective of the men and women of the military who seem to increasingly be political pawns at the disposal of Donald Trump without any sort of checks on his power. We know that Mark Milley and Mark Esper stopped Trump from doing this at Stephen Miller's suggestion during the protests in 2020. I want to play you Mark Esper talking about why that was a bad idea then.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now.
So publicly, and we know from many books and articles that have been written, Mark Esper, Mark Milley, and others push back against people like Stephen Miller in 2020 to slow this down. It doesn't appear from the outside that there are many guardrails against Donald Trump using the military this time. And I wonder if there's an effort to gather a bipartisan coalition in the Senate to do just that.
Nicole, the opportunity we're going to have to do that is the defense bill that we are writing right now. We will likely finish work on the defense bill in the Senate Armed Services Committee in early July. And so we're in the run-up to it, and we will be offering amendments that everybody on the committee will have to vote for to try to put curbs in place so that the president cannot just willy-nilly deploy U.S. military against civilian protesters. I know some of my colleagues are concerned. Those concerns are mostly expressed privately. I was interested to see that Senator Rand Paul yesterday, when asked about the parade this weekend, said this looks like something you'd see in North Korea, not the United States. So there are some who are willing to speak out, even those who are generally supportive of President Trump. But look, you don't want to put the military to this. People don't join the military. One of my kids is a Marine. People don't join the military to face off against fellow Americans who are exercising their First Amendment rights to protest. That's not why they join. And can you imagine the heartache that would be involved in any situation where there's an escalation of violence and you end up with a situation like at Kent State or something like that from 1970, where Americans are badly wounded or even killed because of an unnecessary military escalation. This is also the kind of thing that our adversaries just watch us and they rub their hands with glee. When they see Americans pitted against Americans, instead of the American military effectively used in tandem with allies to check their overreach, they celebrate big time. Let's link arms as a country. Let's link arms with our allies and face off against our real adversaries. Let's not turn fellow Americans into adversaries.